Hello, everyone. We're going to start shortly. We're just going to wait for everyone to settle in. So, bienvenue à tout le monde. On va juste attendre comme quelques minutes pour que tout le monde ait le temps d'arriver. All right, perfect. So I think we're going to get started now. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's EquiTalks. My name is Elyette Levy. I'm a freelance journalist based in Montreal. I worked behind the scenes as an intern for Equitas's 40th International Human Rights Training Program in 2019. And as a political science major, I've always been very passionate about the promotion of social change, especially through human rights education. And so I'm really honored today to be your moderator for the 2021 edition of the EquiTalks, a panel discussion which centers around protecting the rights of youth and promoting our role in the advancement of human rights. So we're really thrilled to be able to welcome you on this online space. And so I want to remind you that in order to make sure this remains a safe space and inclusive space, offensive or discriminatory behavior or language towards event organizers or other guests won't be tolerated in the chat. We'd also love to hear your thoughts on this event on social media with the hashtag EquiTalks. The discussion will be recorded and it will be made available following the event. And since this is a bilingual event, simultaneous translation in both English and French can be accessed by following the links that have been posted in the chat. So you should be able to access that, as well as live interpretation for those who have their Zoom uploaded to the latest version. It should be on the little globe button at the bottom of your screen. Donc, l'événement sera bilingue. Donc, la traduction simultanée de l'événement est disponible en anglais et en français en suivant le lien qui a été publié dans le chat. Et pour celles et ceux qui ont votre application Zoom mise à jour, vous aurez aussi accès à une interprétation en direct dans la barre de menu au bas de votre écran. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Marie-Catherine Toin, Education Specialist at Equitas, to open the talks.
Merci beaucoup, Elyette, pour la présentation. Comme elle l'a mentionné, je m'appelle Marie-Catherine Toin et je suis une spécialiste en éducation à Equitas. J'aimerais vous accueillir officiellement au EquiTalks 2021, où nous discuterons du leadership des jeunes pendant la pandémie. Cette année, en plus d'être pandémique, a fait ressurgir les enjeux de discrimination raciale des personnes noires, asiatiques et plus près de notre histoire autochtone. Avant de débuter, nous tenons donc à reconnaître que les terres sur lesquelles Equitas est situé font partie des territoires autochtones non cédés de Kanien'kehá:ka, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Anishinabek, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh et Musqueam. Notre siège social est situé à Tiohtià:ke, qui signifie l'endroit où les courants se rencontrent, et il est historiquement connu comme un lieu de rassemblement pour de nombreuses Premières Nations. Un des problèmes du colonialisme est qu'il tente de maintenir un ordre social singulier par la force et la loi, en supprimant la diversité des visions du monde. En tant qu'individus diversifiés participant à cet événement, prenons donc ce temps pour nous situer, nous et notre lien avec la Terre, et nous rappeler une histoire d'oppression souvent oubliée ou négligée. Ainsi, tentons de respecter les liens continus avec le passé, le présent et l'avenir dans nos relations avec les peuples autochtones et les autres peuples du Canada. Equitas is pleased to welcome you to the second virtual edition of the EquiTalks. Today's event is all about youth in every way. Not only will the topics be youth-focused, but the voices that will be heard during this event will be voices of young people, including our panelists, Destin, Bujang, Laviolette-Moar, and Ahmad, Elayan, our keynote speaker, Jayathma Wickramanayake, Elyette Levy, our moderator, and myself. Intention was also placed on ensuring that the collaborative process of developing the content of this event involved youth. We're thrilled to have a graphic recorder with us today, Paul Messer from Percolab Co-op, who will be visualizing in real time some of the key concepts and ideas that will emerge from our discussions today. And in line with the theme, in addition to the graphic recorder, there will be 3 young harvesters who have been coached by Percolab to capture the insights, learnings, and connections during the conversations between panelists. The team will share their harvest at the end of the session through art and music. We wouldn't all be here today if it wasn't for the generous support of our sponsors. 11 socially responsible corporate partners have put their trust in Equitas and have contributed to making this event possible. Thank you. Most notably, the TD Ready commitment financially supports Equitas to reinforce children's participation in activities that build their sense of awareness and understanding of diversity and inclusion. The TD Ready commitment also supports public events that engage individuals like you in dialogue about connected and inclusive communities like the event today. We would also like to sincerely thank Power Corporation of Canada and BGIS, both returning partners that have demonstrated their support in Equitas' mission once again. Cette mission, à laquelle nous croyons fermement, est de faire progresser l'égalité, la justice sociale et le respect de la dignité humaine grâce à des programmes d'éducation aux droits humains transformateurs au Canada et partout dans le monde. Ces programmes d'éducation aux droits humains sont mis en place avec des partenaires visant à renforcer le pouvoir d'agir des jeunes. À travers nos programmes canadiens, Equitas appuie, en partenariat avec diverses organisations, le leadership des enfants et des jeunes pour promouvoir la diversité, l'inclusion et la participation communautaire. Au Moyen-Orient et en Afrique du Nord, Equitas et ses partenaires développent des programmes utilisant des nouvelles technologies pour que les voix des jeunes, des femmes et des personnes vivant avec un handicap soient entendues et qu'ils exercent leurs droits fondamentaux et deviennent des vecteurs de changement. Au Sénégal, par l'entremise du projet Promouvoir l'égalité à travers l'éducation aux droits humains, Equitas et ses partenaires locaux visent à rendre le milieu éducatif plus sécuritaire pour réduire les violences faites aux jeunes filles, pour ainsi favoriser leur participation active, contribuer à leur autonomisation à long terme et mener à l'adoption de normes sociales plus favorables et égalitaires. Ce ne sont que des exemples des projets que nous développons à Equitas pour favoriser la participation des jeunes dans la recherche de solutions sur les enjeux qui les affectent. It is in that optic that during the EquiTalks, we will discuss how, as youth, we can redefine social justice movements and how we can strengthen human rights movements during the pandemic. Since the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic will last for years to come, it is critical to include young people in the discussions and decision-making spaces to create more inclusive and equitable societies to contribute to a more positive resolution of this crisis. As an education specialist, I personally value the approach to human rights education at Equitas, which is training for action. I therefore invite you today to not only listen, share, and question, but also to reflect on how these discussions can be transformed into action in your respective settings. On that note, I would like to formally welcome Jayathma Wickramanayake, UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. We are so honored to have Jayathma with us today. A real change maker herself, she was appointed that role at the age of 26 And since then, she leads the UN's youth engagement and advocacy efforts in sustainable development, human rights, peace and security, as well as humanitarian action. As a young woman myself, I am very humbled to have the honor to meet you today, even though virtually. What stood out to me when I read about Jayathma is how prior to accepting her position at the UN, she first played a key leadership role nationally. She saw the importance of tackling national issues that was affecting Sri Lanka youth, including herself, and she recognized and highlighted how changes could not only be made for youth, but with youth. This is why she participated in the creation of a large movement for civic and political engagement of young people named #Generation. Today, Jayathma will discuss ways youth have showed and can show leadership during the pandemic. Without further ado, I'll pass the mic to Jayathma.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Marie-Catherine. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Wherever you are in the world right now, I hope you are well and you're safe and that you are taking care of your mental and physical health during these very challenging times. I'm joining you today from Colombo, Sri Lanka, from my home in my home country. I usually work from New York, but right now I'm in Sri Lanka to visit my parents. So it's even more special for me to speak to you from here, as Marie-Catherine said, the place where I began my youth work and youth activism. So welcome all of you to the launch of this EquiTalks, and please allow me to first thank Equitas, the International Center for Human Rights Education, for the kind invitation to join you in this timely discussion on the topic of youth, power, and pandemic. As the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, I'm delighted to join this panel with excellent youth speakers and practitioners to reflect on how young people have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The majority of barriers that young people experience today are not new, but manifest in more aggravated forms as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, combined with a history of inaction and neglect by decision makers. However, before I start, I want to note that it would be impossible to fully capture the broad range and the breadth and the depth of young people's activism and the impact of the pandemic on that activism and on the impact on youth populations generally. Young people are not a homogeneous group. They experience complex, multidimensional challenges and opportunities that are shaped by the intersections of their age, gender, race, ethnicity, ability, and many other factors. Still, there are some common impacts that young people have drawn our attention to as the issues faced by them as a generation in the past year. First, young people's access to meaningful education and decent employment opportunities in the most important development stage of their lives. This has been hampered by the onset of the pandemic. 1 in 8 young people do not have access to education, the majority of whom are girls, and 1 in 6 young people have lost their jobs during the pandemic. This loss might never be fully recovered. Invaluable moments that young people could have spent learning with and from their peers and colleagues in classrooms and schools and universities, community spaces, workplaces have been replaced by social isolation and stressful navigation of online education and often unfulfilling, if any, job opportunities. Although flawed, even online learning is a privilege to most young people, not a given. Many young people living in the developing world, rural areas, low-income youth, youth without access to digital technologies, are left with little to no support to pursue their education or to find alternatives and to find employment during this pandemic. Despite being often overlooked in education and employment, youth have regularly, though, been the center of attention in the media during the pandemic. Unfortunately, in a very predominantly negative light. Young people have been described as reckless and selfish, those who are partying and spreading the virus to other vulnerable communities, and thus reinforcing these stereotypes that feed into common misconceptions of young people that youth are a threat to be contained or a problem to be solved, rather than looking at them as agents of change and positive actors who bring positive changes in their communities. These harmful narratives persisted despite the fact that many young people are already frontline responders to the pandemic. They're finding solutions to support their communities. They're using technology creatively, and they're challenging oppressive policies that have attempted or violated fundamental human rights under the guise of the pandemic. Indeed, many young people worldwide have turned these obstacles into opportunities and utilized this time and this opportunity to redefine what human rights in the new normal should look like, to help their communities build back better in a just, sustainable, and fair way. When parliamentarians, political parties, political leaders, and other decision-making spaces closed their doors to young people, youth took their political activism to the streets and even to online spaces and platforms. So it's now very common for us to see important discussions regarding civil, political, economic, and social rights happening on YouTube, on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, during cooking tutorials, makeup tutorials, video analysis of pop culture, comedy sketches, and various innovative and creative ways. The right to representation, right to belong, right to live with dignity, free from discrimination, have all been subjects of intense discussions and redefining in a newly created digital civic space. The lack of commitments from governments, though, to tackle urgent issues in communities did not discourage youth, but instead fueled their creativity and innovation to find solutions with minimal resources and support. The door-to-door delivery of services of education material, distribution of flyers containing information about the pandemic in refugee camps, creating songs, tackling misinformation, hand-washing dances and choreographies, and many others are such extremely creative initiatives of how young people navigated or overcame some of the barriers put in place by state and non-state actors that limited their freedom of expression. But despite the powerful resilience and creativity showcased by young people throughout the pandemic, we have also seen immensely brutal and violent methods of repressing young people's freedom of expression and peaceful assembly during this pandemic. In various parts of the world, civic spaces for youth are increasingly shrinking. And even under these circumstances, we see that many young people refuse to stay silent amidst corruption, pervasive inequality, racism, sexism, colonialism, and other forms of human rights violations. The pandemic has truly shown how essential youth voices are for healthy democratic societies, but also how safe spaces are not always guaranteed in those spaces where young people are raising their voices. For this reason, international community and global solidarity is more important than ever. In my work, I encourage all young people to familiarize themselves with the tools and resources that outline human rights and the standards for youth participation, starting from the Universal Declaration on Youth Rights to the World Programme of Action on Youth adopted by the UN General Assembly, to the first ever youth strategy of the United Nations, which is the UN's commitment to better work with and for young people to create safe, meaningful opportunities for participation. Another example would be a global framework that targets the rights and protection of young people is the UN Security Council's various resolutions on youth, peace and security, specifically Resolution 2535. And this features some of the strongest and most action-oriented language on the topic of youth and human rights so far. So please use these tools and these resolutions and these policy documents to hold the relevant stakeholders and duty bearers accountable in your own communities during and after the pandemic. A single policy document on a shelf is not enough to spark long-lasting change, but if used strategically, collectively, and with persistence, it can help you translate these commitments in resolutions that may seem very distant to your day-to-day life from words to powerful action. In my role also as the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, I am time and time again reminded about the power of young people, regardless of the challenges that we witness and the barriers that lay ahead. And I remain hopeful because one thing is clear, young people, ordinary young people, are already achieving extraordinary things. Imagine what could happen if we ensure that they have our full support, recognition, dignity, respect, and safe spaces for them to not just participate, but lead efforts in ensuring human rights for everyone, everywhere. Thank you. Sorry, you're muted, Elyette.
Sorry about that. I was saying thank you for those insightful remarks. I completely agree. I think it's really important to highlight the creativity and the new opportunities that youth have been creating for themselves and have been able to build using limited resources and shrinking spaces. And it's important, especially for us, for youth now, to feel empowered and to feel hopeful about the future. And on that note, I'd like to introduce our panelists, the three amazing human rights changemakers who are all leaders in their communities. Each of them works with youth and aims to work to give greater voice to those who are not often heard. They're all involved in organizations that partner with Equitas, and their work clearly exemplifies how youth are redefining social change. So our first panelist is Laviolette-Moar. Alex est une membre des Premières Nations de la communauté Atikamekw de Manawan. Elle travaille en tant que coordonnatrice en éducation jeunesse au Centre d'amitié autochtone de Lanaudière auprès des jeunes autochtones âgés de 12 à 18 ans. Ces divers projets ont pour but de favoriser la persévérance et la réussite scolaire, de faire du soutien à l'apprentissage et de valoriser la culture et la fierté identitaire. Merci Alex de te joindre à nous aujourd'hui. Our second panelist is Destin Bujang. He's the co-founder and executive director of the Black Creek Youth Initiative in Toronto, which seeks to provide young people with resources to develop their skills and help them navigate systemic barriers. In 2020, Destin received the Canada Service Corps certificate from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for his contribution in improving Canadian communities. His work as the youth ambassador for the Canadian Council for Refugees inspired him to pursue a degree in human rights and equity studies at York University, which he just completed this spring. So congratulations, Destin, and thank you for joining us today. And last, but certainly not least, Ahmad Elayan is a youth scholar at Ruwwad, a nonprofit community development organization in Amman, Jordan. He works with disenfranchised youth and helps to advance social change in his community through education and technology. Since 2016, Ahmad has been involved in many local and regional causes, promoting the rights of youth. And in 2019, Ahmad became the youngest person to ever take part in Equitas's International Human Rights Training Program. So thank you for joining us. And thank you all for being here today. I'm going to start with a more general question relating to the pandemic, and I'll start by asking this to Destin. So Destin, how has the pandemic changed the priorities within each of our communities?
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm actually very thrilled to be part of this panel and in the company of young change makers and vibrant minds from around the world. Before I respond to this question, I think it is very, very important to locate the communities in which our work is based. And the Black Creek Youth Initiative in Toronto is located in one of Toronto's, one of the city's priority neighborhoods, which is what the city has referred to as neighborhoods of improvement areas. It is marked by the most financially disadvantaged neighborhoods in the province, often more inhibited by minority populations and people of color. So this includes obviously Black, Indigenous, and racialized folks. These are communities who have been historically undervalued. So these experiences therefore represent the conditions of most vulnerable communities. As most racialized communities would acknowledge that the pandemic has only exacerbated the inequalities that already, and I'm glad that the UN Envoy pointed that out, because the pandemic has only exacerbated the inequalities that already exist prior to the outbreak of the pandemic. So colored communities with Black and Indigenous people of color, that is, they are most likely to suffer the rippling adverse economic and health effects of COVID-19. Take a look at your surroundings when you go to get services now. Who are the nurses out there? Who are those doing the testings? Who are the transit workers? Who are the essential workers? And now ask, who are those making money? Who are those working from home? So priorities in our communities have significantly changed. Access, especially the access to digital tools, as important. It is as important as food and shelter, because guess what? You may have to order your food using technology. We find households are not able to afford or have access to reliable internet. Talk less of possessing digital equipment such as computers and iPads for every member of the family. Some households have only one computer, for example, which may at the time may be used by a parent for work, or which means that the quality of education that the young people or the people in the house are going to receive is not going to be at a level which they should be attaining. With grocery shopping, banking, education, work, and everything pretty much depending on having fast and reliable internet, it is as important, and it is a basic and fundamental human right that individuals must have connection and internet now. It is also through this means by which community members are able to connect with one another and attend virtual social programs and, in essence, practice self-care. So for a fixed income household, which is the case for most families in Black neighborhoods and in these priority neighborhoods, an additional $60 per se on their monthly expenses on internet, it might just be the difference between getting medical care or caring for their mental health. And I don't think any family should be made to choose between the above concerns. So the backlash of this is the disparities in long-term socioeconomic and health effects for these communities.
Thank you, Destin. What about you, Ahmad? What do you think?
Well, I totally agree with Dustin. The pandemic has shifted and at certain aspects even completely changed a lot of our priorities as community members, as community development organizations, and even as us, the youth activists. When the pandemic first hit, our community members and youth activists prioritized the ensuring that families facing economical challenges have enough supplies and medications to survive through the lockdown, especially families that has lost their source of income due to the immobility of the lockdown. Many activist priorities has also changed from rights to needs, and that was kind of saddening. And to be honest, that's reasonable because of the sudden change of circumstances. But as a temporary state, it's kind of acceptable, but also it's not a method for coping with the pandemic. Human rights violations and inequalities still do happen. And during the pandemic, and especially with the lockdown, it is happening even in our community, even more than ever. As youth activists and young change makers at Rawabet and Ruwwad, we started thinking of ways to bring back focus towards human rights protection, promoting gender equality, protection from domestic violence, and using technology to engage other youth activists and community members, and to promote the protection of human rights during the pandemic. Ruwwad has also launched campaigns that were led by the youth of Ruwwad to provide quick aid to families that were hit the most. And the youth of Rawabet has started planning actions that would sustain the impact that we were leading towards the desired social change. I totally agree with Destin regarding the importance of having internet connection and internet devices for all family members, and definitely no family has to choose between the right of accessing medical health or accessing education for the children. And I'm going to talk more about what we've done in Jordan to overcome this challenge.
Definitely, thank you. Et pour toi, Alex, selon toi, en quoi est-ce que la pandémie a changé certaines priorités dans nos communautés?
Oui, ben merci premièrement de me permettre de parler ici aujourd'hui. Moi, je travaille pour le Centre d'amitié autochtone de Lanaudière. Dans le fond, la mission du centre, c'est pour les jeunes, ben pas juste pour les jeunes, en fait, c'est pour tous les Autochtones qui vivent dans un milieu urbain, qui sont éloignés de leur communauté d'origine. Et moi, je travaille avec les jeunes, puis évidemment, comme mes deux confrères panélistes, il y a eu beaucoup de priorités qui ont changé. Mais pour moi, j'ai vu vraiment une différence, dans le fond, dans la motivation des jeunes à aller à l'école. Je pense que ça a été très prenant à ce niveau-là, de donner un soutien scolaire de plus, autant parce qu'il y avait des problématiques avant que maintenant, avec la pandémie, ben, ça l'a dégradé pour tout le monde. Donc, d'apporter un soutien scolaire de plus, en fait, pour ces jeunes-là, mais aussi ce qui a éveillé dans nos priorités, ben, dans mes priorités pour ces petits, ces petits-là sont pas petits, là, mais c'est de soutenir en fait l'éducation populaire. C'est un éveil à l'éducation populaire pour qu'ils puissent en fait s'engager eux-mêmes dans des enjeux sociaux et qui les rattachent, puis les soutenir là-dedans, puis comme Jayathma disait aussi, offrir un espace sécuritaire pour que ces jeunes-là puissent avoir une voix, pour qu'ils puissent s'exprimer, pour qu'ils puissent prendre la place, en fait, qui leur revient. Je pense que ça aussi, ça l'a beaucoup apporté. Fait que l'espace sécuritaire amène aussi le bris de l'isolement, puis de se retrouver ensemble aussi, là, ces jeunes-là qui viennent de la même communauté des Premières Nations. On a vu beaucoup de changements avec les activités puis les projets, puis ils se sont vraiment mis ensemble, puis ça a apporté ce changement-là de priorité, dans le fond, autant au niveau scolaire qu'au niveau l'éveil, en fait, aux enjeux sociaux qui les entourent.
Merci, Alex. Je suis complètement en accord. Je trouve que c'est quand même vraiment important de ramener ce genre de pouvoir-là aux communautés qui sont marginalisées. Puis en parlant justement de pouvoir, pour moi, le concept du pouvoir, ça veut dire, mettons, les dynamiques de pouvoir, mais aussi l'émancipation et l'impuissance. Donc, je voulais savoir comment est-ce que tu rencontres ces manifestations de pouvoir dans ta vie quotidienne?
Ben, c'est sûr que ces manifestations-là viennent par l'entremise de projets. Quand on propose des projets à ces jeunes-là, il y a comme un éveil au développement personnel, au développement de soi, puis ça l'amène d'autres projets, ça l'amène d'autres activités, dans le fond, qui vont faire en sorte que la mobilisation et la motivation de ces jeunes-là vont revenir, mais aussi, tu sais, qui vont s'accrocher à d'autres choses qui peut des fois les dépasser, tu sais, qui ne vont pas s'attarder à ça sans l'opportunité de ces projets-là ou ces activités-là. Je pense que la manifestation de pouvoir, je l'entrevois par leur capacité de création, avec le peu de choses qu'ils ont, tu sais, en temps de pandémie, ils n'ont pas la chance j'ai l'impression de, comment je pourrais dire, d'atteindre une espèce d'épanouissement personnel parce qu'ils sont éloignés les uns des autres, mais quand arrive le moment où est-ce qu'ils sont tous ensemble, c'est là que c'est palpable, en fait, de les voir s'animer entre eux pour créer, pour atteindre une plénitude, dans le fond. Puis c'est ça, fait que c'est vraiment comme ça que je le vois au travers des projets qu'on fait. On fait beaucoup d'interventions par le plein air aussi, ce qui va venir à les rattacher, ces jeunes-là, avec leur culture, avec leur identité culturelle. Ça va permettre d'amener les choses encore plus loin. Puis c'est là que les idées vont ressurgir là, pour tout type d'enjeux sociaux, en fait.
Merci, Alex. What about you, Destin? How do you encounter different manifestations of power in your everyday life? I think you're on mute still.
I'm losing audio. Could you repeat that?
Oh, of course. So how are you encountering different manifestations of power in your everyday life?
I am losing audio, but I want to hope that you can hear me, and I'm aware of the question that you did ask me. So for me, well, right off the bat, it's no doubt that we live in a world of white supremacy. This means that the ideas and the concepts of whites are always placed superior to other ideas of other races. Now, how do I navigate these manifestations of power? You talked about shifting these power dynamics and empowerment. These are very significant terms for communities to consider when working towards the quest for equality for all. I would be very distinctive about this, and I would propose two ideas to understanding power dynamics and how it manifests in my everyday life and the communities in which we work with. So first, one is resistance, and two is education. Education itself is a form of resistance, but what does resistance look like? Resistance, it means challenging power structures. It means breaking down barriers of stereotypes and patriarchy and having particularly uncomfortable conversations. It also means allyship. Now, after the death of George Floyd last year, the Black Youth Initiative and members of the community had the opportunity to sit down with the Toronto police and some members from politics, and we had conversations around this power structure, and the police were very keen to jump on to say that it is an American problem and policing is better in Canada, and they claimed it's all fine here, it's better here. Meanwhile, these experiences of young people in the community were totally opposite. They get harassed by the police and to and from school, or while playing around in the neighborhoods. They also ask specific questions to the police, such as, can I be safe going to school? What do I do if I'm stopped and I'm searched and I'm asked to be searched? Can I be killed in trying to explain myself to the police? These are things that they've seen, and this is the relationship of power that they have seen between authority and minorities and people of color. And these sorts of questions show that young people are being affected by this abstract nature of power, and this is how it's manifesting in them. And so young people are shifting power by creating and engaging with politics. They are using the information which they have to be able to ask and to assert their rights. So I think that power, once young people are empowered, they're able to use their rights, they're able to use their power, and they're able to use their rights to request, to ask for social changes. How do we see young people, they have taken to social media, they're making they're making sorts of demands which are very compelling. And I'll borrow the phrase from I got from someone: the curtains have been pulled, and it's really hard for so many people to hide now with some levels of injustice that are being put out there, and now people can demand for justice. So that is how I see power being manifested in my community and in my personal life.
Thank you, Destin. That was a really powerful answer. I'm going to address this next question to Jayathma. So building off of what our panelists have said, what concrete strategies can you share for creating spaces for diverse young people to participate in social change?
Thank you, Elyette. And just to maybe say that I completely agree with what our youth speakers have said before me. And I also want to applaud them for the work that they're doing in conditions that are not conducive to youth engagement and activism, particularly during the pandemic. I'm sure all of us are struggling with many issues in terms of our education, our work, mental health. And I think the fact that people like you are fighting for these causes in the middle of all of that shows your resilience and gives a lot of hope, not just to other young people, but also for people like me who inside of institutions are trying to bring about this institutional change so that we can work better with young people as partners. To answer your question, Elyette, from an international perspective, I think often one of the things that I really struggle with, particularly as the UN being a very global institution, is that often you can lose the link with youth who are doing the actual work at the communities and at the grassroots level. And I often keep saying that, it's not the young people who are speaking at UN meetings who need our help most. It's the young people who are not here who needs the UN the most. So really finding ways to not ask young people to come to the UN and fit into our models, but for us to go out there and fit into their models that are already working in communities, that has proven to be impactful, is, I think, the most important strategy that as institutions we need to adapt in working with young people. This also means understanding the power dynamics that young people will always feel as if the institutions are more powerful and more restrictive than they are. So how do we be more flexible and more adaptable in the way that we work with young people so that we treat them not as adults in training, but really as full individuals who have equal rights and equal dignity and equal agency. So in terms of working with grassroots youth organizations and youth who are active in communities, I think some of the biggest challenges for these young people to access institutions is, of course, digital connectivity, particularly at a pandemic situation like this, but also things like access to languages. We often tend to sort of only speak in French and English at the UN, and many young people speak in their native languages. Even for me, English is not my first language, but there are so many other young people who speak different native languages or indigenous languages who might not have access to those conversations. Young people living with disabilities who might not have access to these conversations. So it's very important to make spaces accessible language-wise and accessibility-wise, but also we have to think about the costs young people have to incur when contributing to international processes. So we ask young people to contribute to our consultations or our report or our survey, but we don't even think about how they then find funding to access internet and access spaces where they can actually do that work. So financial support for youth organizations can mean that they are given the resources that are needed for them to self-organize and participate in the way that they desire. And secondly, I think it also needs to be diversified, but a definition or an understanding of who a young leader is. I think even young people feel intimidated by common misconceptions that a young leader can be only somebody who can be outspoken, who has a large social media following, or who can take a megaphone and go out to the streets and protest. And the adult civic spaces also try to handpick and engage with only young people that fit this criteria. But young people's leadership and activism is manifested in numerous forms. And we have to be aware that youth participation for social change will look very different depending on where it's happening. For an example, in a refugee camp or an indigenous community, in a post-conflict setting, in an ongoing conflict setting, and in different forms. Some may choose social media, art, music, theater, writing, organizing, speaking, maybe silent protesting, many ways, various forms of expressing themselves. And we have to sort of break down of those misconceptions of what activism looks like to be more inclusive in the way that we work with young people. Thirdly, I think fostering a culture of accountability and support is also important. Sometimes young people participate in social change, but they give up after a certain period because they are exposed to threats, harassment, surveillance, ignorance, lack of resources, that are challenges in the spaces that are meant to promote social change. This could also happen in the UN. This could also happen in civil society spaces. And this can be frustrating and tiring, especially for young people who are already exposed to discrimination in many other areas of their lives. So ensuring that young people have the resources to turn for accountability when their rights are being violated, even in spaces which are supposed to respect and promote their rights, and giving them that support is necessary to ensure that the participation of them in social change is continuous, systematic, sustainable, and meaningful for both the young person and the institution.
Thank you, Jayathma. I agree. It's very difficult to kind of relate together accessibility and representation, but also change on a more global and international level. It's very difficult to kind of relate those kind of local and international organizations together. And I especially like the phrase that you use, the culture of accountability. I think accountability is not necessarily something that we always hear with the place of youth and human rights in terms of holding people accountable to building those spaces for young people. And I'm also glad that you mentioned internet access and social media and technological devices as examples of platforms to encourage participation, because my next question is for Ahmad, who works a lot with technology and youth. So your work, Ahmad, touches a lot on this. So how has new technology and the digital world influenced how young people participate in social change? Okay, I'm not sure if Ahmad, I believe his internet connection might have cut off. So I'll just move on to the next question, and hopefully we can get him back soon. So my next question is for Destin. We know that connecting youth movements locally and internationally is really important. So what is the role of human rights education in movement building?
I think that it is almost impossible to connect youth movements or movements in general without education on human rights. So I just finished from the university with majoring in human rights, and I can summarize what human rights means in one word. I can summarize what I've learned and applied in the past few years with one word, and that is what unites everyone. And when every community or individual, locally or internationally, when they realize everything changes and movements grow stronger, what is that word that encompasses human rights? It is the truth. It is the truth. When people recognize the truth, they stand up. Once communities realize that they face similar challenges, it is more realistic to deliberate on more effective solutions on a broader solution. So, for example, the roar of a lion is weaker. Of one lion is weaker than 10 lions. It's like finding common terms. So one thing I must mention about human rights is it belongs to us all, and simply because we are humans. It embodies key values of our societies, such as fairness and dignity, equality, and those are common terms that every community wants to see propagate, they want to see manifesting within their community. So a knowledge or education on fairness and dignity, it's only going to make a community stronger. For a long time, Black and racialized folks have been disadvantaged. And I think about how many times that I've been pulled over and I've received tickets without knowing the reason why I was pulled over. I have been pulled over and given a ticket for something else. And I didn't have the courage. I didn't even know what to ask. I didn't even know what question to ask. And maybe the knowledge of a question to ask might have saved me, might have canceled my name off certain records. And that is not only my experience, that is experience of so many young people. That is experience of so many young people who do not know how and what to ask. And I must also emphasize that knowing what to ask is very different from asking or from knowing how to ask. For example, if I am pulled over, it's not, I know that I'm not supposed to be, but how do I say it? So this is education that once young people attain, there is a change in their intellect. For example, the Black Lives, the Black Youth Initiative has had a program it's called Black Lives on the System, and throughout this program we've used this opportunity to have engagements with our community, and through that we've been able to educate, have conversations around different topics including topics of police accountability, microaggressions, barriers to education, systemic racism, and much more. And this is more to ensure that young people know their rights and they know how to practice their rights. It is important. The importance of human rights education in connecting movements is that it's the only tool that is common. It is important. It is an important outcome of human rights education is empowerment, the process through which people and communities increase their control of their own lives and the decisions that affect them. So it is very important. The ultimate goal of human rights education is people working together to bring about human rights, justice, and dignity for all. So I think that it is exceptionally, the importance of human rights to bring movements together, it is invaluable.
Absolutely, I completely agree. I'm going to give Ahmad a chance to answer the question that we had asked while your internet was gone. So your work and your studies touch on this a lot. How has new technology and the digital world influenced how young people participate in social change?
Okay, I'm super sorry for the disconnection that happened. It happens. To answer your question, I'd like to talk about the experience of Ruwwad and Rawabet youth during the hard times we faced last year. To be honest, at the first, when the pandemic first hit, we were devastated about all the challenges and the barriers. We felt that our hands were tied at first and that we couldn't do anything. We can't even push the change. We can't even support. We can't even do anything. That's what we thought at first. But then we started looking into the technology that we've been using all that time. Since the beginning of Rawabet Initiative, we've been using technology, and we had a hybrid approach. Many of our meetings were held already remotely, and all of our teamwork was happening on the cloud. And that model, by the time the pandemic hit, we were already experienced using that model. That's why when the pandemic first hit, what we thought of as youth activists of Rawabet and Ruwwad was about to start sharing our experiences and knowledge and all the tech tools and the technological platforms that we were using. And we started by the youth of Ruwwad, and then we moved on and to widen the impact. And we started also working with our communities to orient them how to use the technology, and also how to continue being an active part of our community using online platforms. No one can deny the importance of technology nowadays, but we also face challenges related to technology, because not everyone, as we mentioned before, not everyone has enough computers at the house, not everyone has a stable internet connection, and also it's always a challenge, and sometimes in many places, and for low-income families, internet is very expensive. That's why in Ruwwad we started a library of digital things where we loan computers, tablets, and other devices, and we also support families that has no income to also purchase internet bundles that can help them to be connected and continue their education, and also continue to participate in our workshop and activities using these computers. We also had to hold workshops to also give people the skills that they need to use these devices. And we also started, going back to what we've done in Rawabet, we also started working on holding online activities and online webinars and workshops. And we also, when we moved online, we also started making sure that we have accessible content, accessible PDFs, accessible Word documents, making the media we use accessible by adding subtitles to videos, adding alternative text to photos, and also working on always having a sign language interpreter during workshops and other activities that are happening online. One of the challenges we had was about, I'm sorry if I'm taking too long. Do I still have time? Just making sure that.
Just to wrap up your sentence.
Okay, so to wrap up my sentence. Nowadays, the challenges the human race went through due to the pandemic proved the usefulness and the importance of technology. We all can be change makers just with the use of social media, following causes and promoting them, supporting those in critical situations, and helping making people's voices heard. Like we every day we see a 1-minute TikTok video that was about a certain cause going viral and reaching millions of people just by sharing. So if I think that every like, comment, and share really counts, and if you think it doesn't, go see how many impactful causes took place online. And I believe we all can make change as youth using technology, one click at a time.
Thank you for that, Ahmad. So my last two questions are going to be lightning rounds. So I'm going to ask a question, name you, and then you answer as fast as you can. So the first question is, what or who inspires you the most? Donc, quoi ou qui est une source d'inspiration pour toi, Alex? Go.
Pardon, j'ai pas compris la question.
Quoi ou qui est une source d'inspiration pour toi?
Ben, clairement, la culture autochtone par rapport aux transmissions de savoir, parce que les jeunes, ils veulent avoir les transmissions de savoir de leurs aînés, puis ensuite donner ça aux plus jeunes qu'eux pour continuer la roue.
What about you, Ahmad?
To me, that would be my friends and colleagues and the vision we share of a better future.
Destin?
Right now, I think my community inspires me a lot, and populations who are facing the adverse effects of the pandemic.
What about you, Jayathma?
It's definitely the young people who are active in the front lines, the young people who I have met in the most challenging situations in the world, from Gaza to Lebanon to Iraq to Somalia, where they are really fighting not just for survival, but to thrive in their communities.
For me, I think not only the communities of young people I see online, but also my family, just for being troopers in this whole pandemic. And last question, what is one key message for us to leave with, a concrete action for us to put into practice to support young people in our communities? Really fast. Alex, quel est un message sur lequel on peut terminer notre discussion, une action concrète qu'on peut mettre en pratique pour soutenir les jeunes dans nos communautés?
Les écouter, tout simplement. Les écouter puis leur donner la chance de s'exprimer.
Ahmad?
We have to ensure that every young person have access to what they need, and also we also have to work on their education to make sure that they have the right mindset to start making change in their communities.
Destin?
Key message, we are not in this together. We are in the same sea, but we're not in the same boat. Concrete action, continue to provide spaces, and I would specify on even bigger spaces for human rights education to be discussed.
Jayathma?
I would say, which is the mantra of the youth movement, nothing about us without us. When you plan policies, plan programs, plan projects, engage young people every step of the way, in planning and implementation, in holding accountability. So partnership is the key message I would take home.
I agree. I think accessibility, engaging young people is definitely one of the most important things that we can do right now. Thank you all for being here and for answering our questions. I'm going to now open the questions to the virtual audience. So if you have any questions specifically for Jayathma, Alex, Destin, or Ahmad, I would invite you to write that down in the chat as well. So our first question is from Olivia Lecoufle from Save the Children Canada. And this question is for Jayathma. Could you give examples of where civic space is shrinking and some root causes of this?
I'm not exactly sure if the question is referring to sort of contexts or countries, but let me answer that this way. The shrinking of the civic space actually started before the COVID-19 pandemic, and we saw how the political rhetoric and the political polarization, not just within countries, but also among countries, exacerbated to a level where it created governments to crack down activists, closed spaces that were otherwise available for civil society to participate, reduced funding that goes into not just civil society organizations, but also to the United Nations itself. We know some governments who were very vocal about not only passively not supporting multilateralism and international solidarity, but was actively attacking international solidarity and multilateralism. So the shrinking of civic space happens, I think, both in offline and online spaces. We see this through increased surveillance, tracking down of activists who speak dissent, who have dissenting opinions, and generally people exercising their freedom of expression and freedom of rightful assembly. We've seen this happen many times when youth activists take it to the streets to take action. Right now, one of the places we see this happening most is Myanmar, where youth activists are out on the streets demanding for the military coup to end and for their democratically elected government to take place. And we see that some of the youth activists have even lost their lives in the process for just being out there and speaking up to reinstate democracy in their country. So this is just one example, but this sort of repression of youth voices and activism happens in civic spaces, both online and offline.
Thank you, Jayathma. We have a question from Aklobo. Qui dit « Je réfléchis également aux défis spécifiques auxquels les jeunes LGBTQ2I sont confrontés et aux mouvements qu'ils mettent dans le contexte de la pandémie. C'est une considération essentielle pour l'inclusion, l'éducation aux droits humains et des mouvements transversaux. Quelles sont vos réflexions sur cela spécifiquement? » I'll open it up to anyone who wants to answer. Destin, if you had an answer for that.
Pardon, traduction. Could you? I'm just gonna catch up with the English translation.
Of course, yeah. So he says that he's thinking specifically about challenges linked to LGBTQ2I youth and the challenges that they've been confronted during the pandemic. So what are your reflections on that topic specifically? I believe that you're on mute also. Oh oui, Alex, si tu veux répondre. Oui.
Est-ce que je peux répondre?
Oui, absolument.
Ben, je pense que à travers TikTok, surtout, on l'a beaucoup vu. Ils ont pris beaucoup de place pour cette communauté-là. Puis je trouve ça vraiment intéressant parce que en prenant cette place-là sur les réseaux sociaux, ils ont permis en fait de s'approprier quelque chose à eux pour eux, puis d'informer ceux qui font pas partie de cette communauté-là, puis des informer, puis ça a éveillé des curiosités, je pense, autant entre les jeunes que les personnes plus vieilles, les adultes, dans le fond, là, qui sont pas nécessairement toujours au courant de tout ce qui se passe. Puis, mais je pense que oui, c'est ça. Ils ont vraiment, en prenant cette place-là sur les réseaux sociaux, ça leur a permis en fait, comment je pourrais dire, un partage, mais aussi surtout un sentiment d'appartenance pour les personnes qui se posaient peut-être des questions ou qui se sont trouvées là-dedans finalement.
Merci, Alex. I'm going to, if there are no other responses to that question, I'll move on to the next question. From Catherine, who says, do we need to be cautious and aware for youth for whom speaking out is dangerous? Should that stop us from giving them a voice? Whoever wants to answer. I'm going to go with Destin, though. I think you have an answer for that.
Yes, I don't think that it would never go wrong giving young people a voice. I think that to even think about any limitation of space or young people to have a voice to speak, to even think about limitations is not a way to go. I'll give you an example. And I think that it encompasses another question that was asked here that was discussed sometime in the conversation around social media, how social media also provides young people bad information, which is true. And a lot of young people, a lot of parents have called me and they said my child or my son, or this young person is over involved in social media and they are overdoing it. And the best advice that I have spoken to is to know how to practice using it safely. The reason is because social media, for example, where everyone can have their voices out there, it is inevitable. It is almost inevitable, especially now. So you might want to see into better practices. I have advised people sometimes, like, figuring out the range of maybe limiting people's selves to a number of hours a day, maybe even if it is 5 hours, 6 hours, but then you want to make sure that after that, you're not doing it anymore. But I think that when it goes back to my point, once young people are equipped and they are effectively equipped, they know how to use it and to what range to use it. So I think that opening spaces for young people is never a bad idea. It's always a brilliant idea to continue opening spaces for young people through art, through, as was mentioned, it doesn't have to be using a voice. It could be opening spaces to use art, to use their skills as authors, as writers, as spoken word artists, right? So it's very important to continue giving young people the opportunities and to make sure that they have the best possible outcomes for their lives.
I'm going to maybe ask Ahmad. I'll just repeat the question because I believe that you've experienced this also in your personal life as well as in your work experience. But do we need to be cautious and aware for youth for whom speaking out is dangerous? Should that stop us from giving them a voice?
I think this has to be moderated a case by case scenario, but I believe that we have to provide a very safe space and talkative and a safe space for the youth to talk and express their opinions and their ideas. And an idea that the community might consider dangerous might not be dangerous for them. So that's why such spaces must be available and provided for the youth, so they can express their ideas and opinions, and they can reflect on while talking about it with other people. And that's what I think. I think that we must not take their voice away. We have to provide them with a space where they can like at least discuss their ideas and opinions. And as I said, there's like some cases, some extreme cases where like we have to intervene, but not like killing the voice, but like having a more thoughtful discussion to know where is that coming from and how to maybe have a discussion about it and make that person understand that this idea or this opinion might be dangerous for the community and for others.
Thank you, Ahmad. We've got a question from an unidentified audience member who says, thanks for this wonderful discussion. I agree that promoting access to internet is fundamental, but it might be dangerous without adequate guidance. Are current education programs on human rights incorporating education on misinformation? And I'm going to ask maybe Jayathma if you want to jump in on that question.
I would put it this way. I think the technology and how fast the technology has grown has been disproportionate to how fast our education systems have been updated and evolved, and how fast our legal systems have been updated and evolved. Not just education, but we sometimes don't even have enough laws to deal with issues that are coming up with regards to, for an example, privacy issues and protection issues that are being occurred because of digital technologies, particularly social media. So I don't think the answer is not giving access to digital technologies for young people. I think that access to internet should be a human right that everyone should be able to enjoy. We live in a world where technology is increasingly becoming, or has already become, a big part of our lives, a big part of how we express ourselves, a big part of how we receive information, how we do our jobs, how we get our education. So having equal access to internet and technology, I think, is fundamental moving forward. But where we need to be better at is not letting technology companies or social media companies decide what the rules of the game should be. It has to be citizens, it has to be people, it has to be governments who need to have an upper hand when it comes to holding these corporations accountable. And a part of that is definitely educating people, students, communities about the pros and cons of digital technologies. I think everything has its goods and bads, and we need to inculcate skills and knowledge in young people to be analytical, to be logical, so that when they see a piece of information, they know how to take it, and they run through a logical decision-making process before accepting that information as it is. And I think this is important not only in terms of sort of avoiding online violence like bullying and harassment, sextortion that happens online, but also we have seen how terrorist groups use technology and digital platforms to recruit members to terrorist cadre using these platforms. They approach young people using these platforms. So not just to tackle misinformation and violence, but I think also to protect yourself from challenging and negative things that exist out there in the digital space. It's important for young people to be empowered with those skills and the knowledge in the broad scope of things.
Absolutely. And I have one last question que je vais poser à Alex. Donc, c'est une question de Rachidi Matadi qui l'envoie par email. Quel engagement citoyen doivent adopter les jeunes face à la pandémie? Oui.
Quel engagement citoyen? Je pense que l'engagement citoyen, c'est vraiment de s'informer, comme disait en fait Destin, Ahmad puis Jayathma. Sur Internet, ça va très vite. Tout va très, très vite. Puis, d'apprendre, nous, en tant que personnes qui travaillent avec ces jeunes-là, étant jeunes nous-mêmes, on peut donner cette possibilité-là de bien s'informer, d'aller voir les sources, puis aussi de se faire une opinion soi-même. Puis c'est vraiment ça, le pouvoir citoyen de ces jeunes-là, c'est de comment que je prends l'information puis que je m'en fais une opinion, que je me crée une opinion, puis comment que je la partage aussi, cette opinion-là. Parce que, tu sais, quand on est enfant, on nous apprend le respect, on nous apprend à dire merci, on nous apprend à dire s'il vous plaît, puis on n'a pas, tu sais, quand que la technologie est arrivée, quand Internet est arrivé avec les médias sociaux, on nous a pas dit sois pas méchant avec lui qui est méchant sur Internet. Tu sais, c'est pas arrivé comme ça. Mais tu sais, ça, c'est à nous qui travaillons avec les jeunes tu sais, de parler de ça, pas juste par rapport à la cyber-intimidation, mais aussi par rapport aux informations qu'ils reçoivent. Fait que je pense que c'est vraiment ça, le pouvoir citoyen de ces jeunes-là, c'est d'avoir quelque chose qu'ils ont devant eux, puis de s'en créer, de s'en faire une propre opinion personnelle, puis de bien la partager, cette opinion-là.
Absolument, je suis complètement d'accord. C'est vraiment important de redonner ce genre d'éducation-là à tous les jeunes qui n'ont pas vraiment eu le temps ni même comme de direction par les adultes qui sont supposés nous enseigner tout ça à propos de la technologie, mais que c'est arrivé tellement vite qu'on a vraiment juste pas eu le temps. Puis aussi, I also am just seeing now the time. We're going to try and share back answers to questions following the event for just the ones that we didn't have time to answer. But for now, we have to keep moving on. And we've been talking a lot about how youth are redefining and coming up with creative ways to bring about social change, and artistic expression is definitely one of them in a less traditional way. So I'm really excited to introduce Paul Messer and the team of youth harvesters from Percolab to share back with us what they've gathered from this experience.
Thank you. And thank you for that beautiful kind of conversation. It's been a pleasure to listen to it. So I'd like to invite the youth harvesters just to put on their camera. And so Josephine, Olivia, Amina, and Jonathan, if you could join me. Here we are. So everybody's been busy behind the scenes. And so if you're ready, Jojo. So Jojo's a musician and has been listening in. So I don't need to describe it. So go for it, go.
So here's a musical creation that I've been working on during this whole presentation. I hope you enjoy it.
J'aimerais vous accueillir officiellement au EquiTalks 2021 où nous discuterons du leadership des jeunes pendant la pandémie. Without further ado, I'll pass the mic to Jayathma.
Hello everyone, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world right now. I hope you are well and you are safe and that you are taking care of your mental and physical health during these very challenging times.
The culture of accountability.
So even think about limitations is not a way to go.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Josephine. So we had one musician who was listening in, and Josephine was capturing things and being playful with that. And we have 3 graphic recorders who are kind of just being coached and learning. And so Olivia, if you're ready, let's have a look at what you've created.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to bring my camera a bit closer. So I was creating a visual harvest based off of what I heard. And we heard a lot about youth being agents of change and how the activism that they're involved in creates a huge impact through changing the dynamic that is held, and this impacting human rights and human justice as being the core basis for those changes, all going towards trying to build back better. So all the human rights movements can be connected to one another, and we're building community by connecting each other and empowering all of the members to actually be involved. And engagement is extremely important to that. So people engage in different ways based on their opportunities, their resources, and the accessibility to different platforms, but all going towards the same thing, which is social change. And the main thing around youth engagement is that we shouldn't be doing anything without them. So nothing about us without us was really striking to me. And creating that power and sharing power means being more equal and being more inclusive. So creating those spaces for youth to be engaged and bring forward what is important to them, and creating platforms for them, and so that they can take their voice and share their voice. And human rights belong to all of us. So creating this space for us all to have the impact that we want to desire and be involved in social justice is really important. Thanks,
you. Olivia. That's perfect. John.
Hi, everyone. So thank you for everyone who participated in the conversation today. I will go to a quick rundown of what I captured today, of a few ideas and concepts that really stuck out to me.
Perfect.
The first one is the idea of diverse backgrounds and diverse challenges. So not everyone has the same, comes from the same background, and so not everyone is gonna have the same challenges, but there's some things in common, like employment and education that the young people are facing, and this creates common ground, and from there we're able to make opportunities from that. The second thing is the technology, obviously. The accessibility to technology was a big topic today, and also the social media, the role that it has been playing this year, especially in the context of the pandemic. We've seen how technology takes a bigger place. Then we have the access to education and the motivation component of it within the context of the pandemic. We also have this idea of youth voices, of having a safe space for youth voices, of having uncomfortable conversations and being able to create a allyship within those voices. Related to those topics, there's also the topic of human rights, education. So having the tools to have those conversations, to respond to situations with the right language, the right ideas, and be able to stand up for what we believe is right. And finally, there's this idea of having different form of activism. So not everyone expresses their needs and their challenges in different ways. And so we have to be open to that kind of diversity. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, Amina, you're up next.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So this is what I have right here. And I'm trying to capture the complexity that's involved with empowering youth and giving them authentic power. So one thing that I heard was the importance of education and how education is used as a tool for accessibility and also not being silent. And even though we were faced by a pandemic, there were a lot of challenges that came with it, but it also gave rise to awareness for social justice, and the communities engaged, and there was even more global solidarity. We also spoke about giving youth authentic power and involving them in decision making, and how we need to create more spaces that are inclusive in space, and the role of social media and media in general and technology that's playing for all of this to happen. So that's what I have.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you all three, and some lovely comments that are already coming into the chat. So just, yeah, wherever you are, just have a moment of appreciation. And thank you to all of the graphic recorders.
Yes, thank you all so much, Josephine, Amina, Jonathan, and Olivia. I've honestly I had never heard of youth harvesting and graphic recording before this event, and honestly, I'm always amazed whenever I see just really creative expression of youth, and I'm honestly continuously impressed by the work of youth in arts, in human rights, and social change. And so I believe this concludes our panel. I'd like to thank Alex, Ahmad, Destin for participating and sharing your insights and experiences from your important work with youth. I also wanted to thank Marie-Catherine for your appearance and your opening remarks at the beginning of the talks. And special thanks to Jayathma Wickramanayake, the UN Special Envoy on Youth, for taking the time to join us today and sharing your thought-provoking and hopeful remarks, and inspiring us to continue to advocate for social change. I would also like to thank everyone again for attending today's EquiTalks and for showing your support for the role of youth in human rights and social change. And also thank you for Equitas for creating this important space here today. I hope that this discussion sparked some motivation for you to stay and engaged. And if it did, here are some other ways that you can keep this conversation going and support human rights education and engage with Equitas. So you can check out the website for tools and activities. You can take the free online course about human rights, check out the regular newsletter, or make a donation to support Equitas's work with youth. And finally, I'd also like to invite you all to our virtual networking event, which is going to start in 2 minutes. It's going to be in the format of small breakout rooms where you'll be able to discuss today's session and meet with other people from all around the world who are also interested in this topic. So for those who've already registered, you should be able to find a personalized link in your email. And for those who haven't, but who are interested in joining us, please use the registration link that has just been posted in the chat. And then once that's done, you can just check your email and get the personalized link for you to participate. So thank you all again, and I hope to see you there.